and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and it is now 9:10 p.m. in the pretty dark and gloomy Central European city of Budapest. Thank you, everybody who has joined me. I really appreciate it. And obviously, however gloomy things are in Budapest, I mean, things are kind of grim in Washington, D.C., for a number of reasons. We've now had a couple of days of really depressing confirmation hearings in the Senate. We've had Bobby Kennedy Jr. Confirmation hearings. We've had Kash Patel's confirmation hearings. We've had Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearings. And, one has to say that they were as bad and as depressing as one had been led to believe. Now, the most depressing event, obviously, is the mid-air collision that took place last night in D.C., whereby a Black Hawk helicopter went straight into a American Airlines passenger airplane, and the two aircraft went crashing into the Potomac, and everyone was killed. So obviously this is quite horrific, and we obviously do not know what caused this, how it came about. And the one thing one obviously can say is that this sort of thing should not happen. It cannot happen. I mean, there's just no way that anything like this could happen, because this is Washington, D.C. The military helicopters are flying all the time. There are big airports in D.C., and military helicopters are not supposed to go crashing into civilian airliners, and particularly in this case, where the air traffic control had given clear warnings to the helicopter. Basically, can you see the airline? I mean, that's what the air traffic controller says. Can you see it? And then told the crew of the helicopter, which was, this is what you need to do. How you should go about it. It's like you go behind the airliner. So in other words, the air traffic control saw what was happening. It seemed a little surprised about the lack of reaction from the helicopter crew. Now, obviously, we don't really know what exactly happened. Now, two things have already taken place, which was, first of all, the initial onslaught from the liberal media was to blame Trump for this. Oh, Trump wanted to cut back on FAA hiring, federal hiring overall, and that this was the cause of the crash. Simply the hiring freeze. That was what did it. But of course, that was a completely ridiculous claim, because it's only 8 days have elapsed since Trump issued the executive order on a hiring freeze. And so therefore, this couldn't possibly have had any impact on this terrible crash. But nonetheless, it was this was the initial response. Somehow it's Trump's fault. There's a lack of safety. It was, that because it's against the federal government. So therefore, any cutbacks on on federal hiring must result in crashes. So that was the response. That was the initial response. There was no hesitation about trying to assign blame primarily to Trump, but secondarily to Elon Musk and the whole Doge project of trying to reduce federal hiring. As I say, this was always a ridiculous argument because you might make the claim, the initial claim, after a certain amount of time had elapsed. But 8 days, there was really, there was nothing that was said for 8 days. I mean, you didn't start firing a lot of useless baggage in 8 days. So that was ridiculous. But then Trump, in his news conference later in the day, brought up the subject of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, which he, of course, has said, as through an executive order, has put an end to in all federal agencies. He said, well, that was that could well be behind it. Though at the same time, he also said that we don't yet know what the real cause of it is. But almost immediately from the time that he sent out his first truth, he said, well, this was an avoidable accident. Now, obviously, one can say two things about that. First of all, Trump is the president. Therefore, he, as president, will know more than we do. And therefore, because he's getting briefings from the transport safety people. He's getting briefings from intelligence. Therefore, he will know something about the causes of the crash, even though there hasn't been any kind of obviously a formal investigation. But he will at least have some information at his disposal that we don't have. So therefore, when he says this accident was avoidable, well, he probably knows something we don't know. And then later on, so that was his initial response when he sent out a truth quite early on yesterday evening. And then at the news conference today, when he explicitly said it was DEI, and again, he said, well, that helicopter should not have gone smashing into that civilian aircraft. I mean, it's just not supposed to do that. I mean, helicopters, their great strength, I mean, they may not be particularly strong, but particularly sturdy, but their great strength is they can change direction, they can stop in the air. There's a great deal of flexibility in what they can do, much more so than regular fixed-wing aircraft. So they said that, well, it shouldn't have happened. And in particular, as I say, in this case, where the air traffic control had clearly, sent out a message. We've heard the audio. It sends out a message. Can you see this aircraft? And told him exactly what you should do in relation to the aircraft. You have to follow from behind. So Trump said, well, it was DEI, though he also said, we don't yet know exactly what happened. This, of course, then triggered the familiar meltdown in the media, the Guardian, Politico, the New York Times, Washington Post. Oh my God, Trump, without any evidence, is blaming DEI for this accident, without any evidence. Now, there's a real problem here. As I say, Trump has access to evidence that we don't have. It could be Trump is talking through his hat. But that could be. I mean, that's possible. Basically, he's just making up as we go along. But you can't make that assumption because, again, you can't say that a president is speaking without evidence. He obviously has evidence. he's obviously getting briefing. I mean, when you have something like this, particularly a horrific accident, really just a few miles away from the White House, and therefore there's always the potential that this is a terrorist incident, or that this is America's under some kind of terrorist attack and whatever. So therefore, he would get a very early briefing. He would have received a briefing early in the evening about what had happened. It's almost, there's just no question a president would receive an early briefing and would get a series of briefings early on about what had taken place. So the idea of the media saying, oh, well, Trump is just sitting at home eating his burgers, watching CNN, and then tweeting things out or truthing things out, it's stupid. This is the typical stupid, trivial, nonsensical, brainless nonsense that the mainstream media peddle. That is, they want you to believe that Trump is just sitting there in his underwear in the White House, watching CNN, munching his burgers and fries, drinking his Diet Pepsi, and then tweeting things out because he's feeling pissed off about something. Now, so that's all completely nonsensical. Again, we can't possibly say we know what happened. We obviously don't know what happened. But we do know that in any kind of an accident like this, air accidents, air crashes, anything like that, 99% of the time, it's because of human error. Again, it's technical, old-fashioned equipment. Too many planes, too many, the right runways are crowded. Faulty, communications, whatever. No. Say 99% of air crashes are caused by human error, and primarily by pilot error. Okay, 99% caused by pilot error. That's not to say, you don't want to blame pilots. It's a difficult job, but nonetheless, that's what causes accidents. So we can be pretty sure that whatever happened last night had nothing to do with faulty equipment, too many planes up in the air, airspace is crowded, the runways are full, not enough people in the air traffic control, all of these things that the media are going to spin and to tell you that's what's to blame. That's what's that's the blame. Not enough people in the air traffic control. Not too many aircraft flying, whizzing around. That's what's behind it. No. What do we know so far? The air traffic control saw the helicopter quite a bit before the crash and told the helicopter, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Can you see the civilian airliner in front of you?" And you can just see it. I mean, it's just heading straight to into the civilian airliner. So again, we don't know why that happened. And so that was clearly what Trump was saying. Well, I think it's DEI, because you have two possibilities. As I say, obviously it's human error, and given the length of time from the moment that the air traffic controller tells the helicopter, "Can you see this aircraft in front of you?" and then the time that elapses before it goes smashing into the aircraft, then you got two possibilities. Either it is a terrorist incident. In other words, it was a deliberate attack on a civilian airliner, or it's rank incompetence. Now, again, we can't rule out the terrorism thing. I'm not saying it is, but people who immediately rule it out, you always it's the same crowd crowd who are always, oh, Trump said this without any evidence. There's no evidence for this. So you always rule out, well, Trump said this without evidence, and then they say, well, this wasn't terrorism. No, it wasn't terrorism. No, not terrorism. And say, well, how do you know that? I mean, what how do you know this was not a deliberate act? Precisely, someone got some crazy guy smashed his helicopter into the civilian airline. Again, I'm not saying that's what happened, but how do you rule out terrorism? But anyway, either it's terrorism or it's rank incompetence. And then you say, well, how do you get to rank incompetence? Why would there be people flying around very expensive and very sophisticated military helicopters if they're so incompetent? Say, hey, here's an extremely expensive top of the line military helicopter. Well, why don't you get in front of the wheel? Just fly it around. Fly it in DC, where there's so much air traffic taking place. Therefore, Trump made the reasonable speculation. I mean, he could have done the alternative and said, well, it might have been Al Qaeda. He didn't say that. I mean, you could say that. I want no evidence for that at all. No, there's no evidence that it was Al Qaeda. But at this stage, I don't know how you can rule it out. But then you get the same without evidence. Now, let's imagine that this had happened sometime after, Trump's executive order freezing federal hiring, and what would have happened again? What would have happened then? No question, the media would immediately, from the New York Times down, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Guardian, Politico down, every single one of them would be running with stories. Well, this hiring freeze, this lack of, personnel, that's what's to blame for this. No one would have had any hesitation. They would have said, "Oh, without evidence, no evidence." I think Trump's speculation is entirely reasonable. It is speculation, but on the other hand, as speculation goes, I don't see anything wrong with putting forward something that people want to know. We can go on with boilerplate. We can go on saying, expressing our, heartfelt sorrow for the victims and their families. We can go on promising full, thorough, and comprehensive investigations, the report, the results of which will be published in about a year's time. Or we can do, what a president does. He says, okay, well, that's kind of what I'm hearing. There was this woman, Caitlin Collins. She, of course, challenged, she's the woman from CNN. And she challenged Trump during the news conference. She said, well, you're throwing around this speculation while we don't even know, we haven't, the names of all the passengers. The names of the people killed have not been released, and you are already speculating about the causes. No evidence. And then Trump reasonably said to her, well, what difference would it make if we had the names of the passengers? It's like, well, you've made this into an issue that, the names of the passengers. So that's going to make some kind of a difference so we know who the names of the passengers are. And incidentally, again, normally whenever people talk about victims justice, they want, well, victims need closure. I think victims would like some closure, would like some explanation, tentative, whatever, for how this could have happened. It's not supposed to happen. This is Washington, D.C., the greatest power in the world, the capital of the greatest power in the world. People, planes take off and land, every couple of minutes. Helicopters fly around all over the place. Helicopters are not supposed to crash into passenger airliners. It's not supposed to happen. So you want to know, well, what could be behind this? So we don't know, but I do think it's very amusing that the media, with all this media bluster, comes along and is directed at Trump. How dare he suggest that DEI might have been behind this, when the chances are, again, if we rule out terrorism, and I don't think we can yet, but let's say we're going to rule that out, then obviously it is an error. It had to have been an error. As I say, 99% of air accidents arises out of human error and primarily pilot error. So therefore, it had to have been out of error, and therefore it's reasonable to ask, well, what could have caused this error? This is, you're dealing with highly sophisticated equipment here, and you're not supposed to make so egregious a mistake as fly into a civilian airliner. Anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing that went on in DC are these confirmation hearings, and it was again, as always happens, the Democrats never raise any issues that the nominee will have to deal with during his or her term in office. So, in particularly with Tulsi, they spent a lot of her time talking about Edward Snowden. And we'll think, well, Edward Snowden, that goes back to 2013, which is now almost 12 years ago. And they demand, again, what do they want with Edward Snowden? I mean, this all happened 12 years ago. Why are you bringing up Edward Snowden? And they wanted her to denounce Edward Snowden as a traitor. A traitor. There's no reason whatsoever to think that he's a traitor. He was a whistleblower, and clearly he revealed important information that initially the heads of the U.S. intelligence agencies, including James Clapper, lied about. I mean, the information that he revealed was about mass surveillance, and that the U.S., the National Security Agency in particular, was engaged in mass surveillance of the U.S. population. And then when this came up, Clapper, who was head of, he wasn't DNI, was it DNI? Anyway, I think, well, I can't remember whether that was a position. Anyway, I can't exactly remember what Clapper's position was, but Clapper said, absolutely not. We are not engaged in any kind of mass surveillance. This was an outright lie, and Clapper himself had to walk back his denials as the Snowden documents, began to be published, and it was clear that yes, indeed, the NSA was engaged in mass surveillance. Now, this was a classic case of a whistleblower. That's what you're supposed to do as a whistleblower, because clearly the public did not know. The public had accepted this notion that the government does not spy on Americans. Oh, we don't spy on Americans. No. We spy on foreigners, but we don't spy on Americans. And of course, this was all nonsensical because, of course, the government has all sorts of ways in which you can spy on Americans, which was basically you spy on a foreigner. You pick on any foreigner, you can always do that. And then once that foreigner has a conversation with an American, then you can of course spy on the American. That's a very clever way of doing it. So you don't initiate through spying on American. You do it by the communication. That's how, if you recall, that's how they got Michael Flynn, after he spoke to Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Now, of course, Russian Ambassador Kislyak was indeed spied on by the U.S. government, and everyone says, okay, well, that's acceptable. But Kislyak was having a conversation with Flynn. Then they knew, therefore, what Flynn was engaged in. But here, the government then did something that they're not supposed to do, which is that a conversation with an American, that has to be absolutely kept secret. You cannot disclose the content of a conversation involving an American. And of course, that was leaked to the Washington Post, and David Ignatius then wrote that story about Michael Flynn. Had told Kislyak that the Trump administration would lift sanctions, Obama's sanctions against Russia. Of course, that was a lie. Michael Flynn had said nothing of the sort, but that was that enabled them by publishing in the Washington Post. So that helped put Russiagate into the out in the public sphere, and everyone ran with it. But what Snowden revealed was, of course, this was mass surveillance. Now they attacked Snowden by saying, "Oh well, yeah, but if you're a whistleblower, you're supposed to go through a certain procedure." And he didn't go through a procedure. But of course, if he'd gone through a procedure, that wouldn't have got him anywhere anyway. There've been others who have tried to go through the procedure of going to Congress and then seeing see what the Congress would do. But that never really reaches anything. And in any case, all this talk about he was a traitor and revealed secrets, but he revealed secrets that we needed to have revealed. The secrets that he revealed was the mass surveillance of Americans, which is supposed to be outlawed, which is not supposed to be done. It's not the U.S. government is not supposed to spy on American citizens, and so therefore, the idea of berating Tulsi for refusing to call Snowden a traitor is quite ridiculous, because Snowden was not a traitor. He was, he wasn't revealing this to any foreign adversary. He wasn't, hey, we got some secrets and I'm going to reveal this to a foreign adversary. He was raising the alarm about something that it should be raised an alarm, and other senators, including Ron Wyden, has said, yeah, well, this is these are important issues that need to be raised. Which was, hey, the U.S. government shouldn't be spying on U.S. citizens. And so to say, oh, he's a traitor. Well, what is a traitor? Then you can say that Daniel Ellsberg was a traitor. I mean, again, he released to the public, stuff that was, secrets. These were This was classified documents. Yeah, what Snowden released to the public were classified documents, as did Daniel Ellsberg. Now, of course, Daniel Ellsberg, was sanctified. Oh, he's a wonderful, great, he's revealed all these secrets. Well, yeah, that's easy. It's easy to do after the fact. 25 years later, or 30, 35, 40 years later, you can celebrate what Daniel Ellsberg did. And say, oh, what a wonderful, wonderful man, a freedom fighter, revealed all these egregious things that the U.S. government was doing. Well, that's easy to do. Easy to do it after the fact. Not so easy when you do it contemporaneously. Well, what about the person who's doing it today? Like Julian Assange, who's revealing important information today, or Edward Snowden, who's revealing important information today. We're traitors. Traitors. Oh, in the case of Assange, he's working for the Russian government. Though again, no one seems to say, hey, without any evidence, but you're working for the Russian government. So they brought this up against Tulsi. Somehow she's supposed to call him a traitor, even though, as I say, Snowden brought something important out to the public. So that was all profoundly obnoxious. And then we had the attack on Kash Patel. Now, let's sort of imagine, this the important thing to remember about Kash Patel is that he played a crucial role in exposing the Russiagate hoax. A truly poisonous, horrific event in American public life, which was put out by the Democrats in alliance with the media. It was started off with a fraudulent dossier by Christopher Steele, paid for by the Clinton campaign. Not content with that, not content with just simply paying for this crock, this deliberately deceitful crock, not content with that. They tried to push the media into publishing this nonsense, this farrago by Steele. And when the media, saying, well, all these claims, there's no evidence for them. When that didn't work, the Clinton campaign decided to use the FBI to begin an investigation, a criminal investigation into Trump and his campaign. So they basically lied to the FBI in order to get them to launch this investigation, and of course then to leak to the media that they had started this investigation, and thereby to destroy the Trump campaign, and of course then destroy the Trump presidency. Now, the Democrats went along with this. This went on, year in, year out. This nonsense with Russiagate continued. Key figure, of course, in this Russiagate hoax was Adam Schiff, who, of course, played a role today in attacking Kash Patel. Now, Kash Patel had played an important part in exposing Russiagate. Remember, it took a long time to find out who was behind the Steele dossier. We didn't know because the Clinton campaign, a lot of people suspected that the Clinton campaign was behind this, but the Clinton campaign continued to deny that they had financed the Steele dossier. And so it was really Kash Patel was working for Devin Nunes, who exposed that, who exposed exactly what happened with the Steele dossier, that he was funded, that this was an opposition research, basically a total smear job. And so that it was we had to rely on Devin Nunes, and of course through Devin Nunes was Kash Patel. So he was getting attacked by the same Democrats who were really involved in sending out this nonsense, this outrageous nonsense of the Steele dossier. And so the outrageousness, this disgusting thing of attacking Kash Patel for doing is gain a public service, just like Edward Snowden did a public service. Kash Patel did a public service in revealing the really, I mean, in this case, it really is a treasonous enterprise of the Clinton administration, of Hillary Clinton, rather. That they invented this thing, this Russiagate hoax, and were essentially trying to use the FBI to launch a criminal investigation into her political opponent, or based on a hoax. Imagine you give the FBI a hoax and say, well, yeah, launch a criminal investigation. So that was Kash Patel under attack. Really, absolutely outrageous attack. And then, of course, we had the specter of these attacks on Bobby Kennedy Jr. and in particular his attack on the attack on him by Elizabeth Warren. So Elizabeth Warren, who was supposed to be this populist, this left-wing populist, and again, as did Bernie Sanders, these kind of left-wing populists, standing up for the ordinary guy, against the big corporations. So they were attacking Bobby Kennedy Jr., claiming that he was somehow going to benefit from litigation against Big Pharma. Now, the point about litigation Big Pharma, first of all, has very deep pockets. This is Big Pharma is peddling all sorts of very dubious, very dangerous drugs. And really, whether Bobby Jr. makes a little bit of money on that is neither here nor there. The important thing is what might be exposed through the litigation. If Big Pharma is trying to palm off on the public a very dubious drug, then that's something that needs to be exposed. But instead of focusing on, and in this case in particular with the vaccines, instead of focusing on that, they launched this attack on Bobby Jr. because he supposedly might make money, I guess in the future. I don't know if he'd make money now, but in the future he might make money through litigation against Big Pharma. Oh, there is a conflict of interest. That was it, the conflict of interest. And the Wall Street Journal editorial page was, of course, salivating over this. Yeah, and it's like, whoa, very surprising. We're on the same side as Elizabeth Warren. Oh, really surprising this. So the Wall Street Journal, which basically is in the business of attacking anyone who challenges the power of their corporations, particularly the big pharma. So they find themselves, oh, this is nice. We're on the same side as Elizabeth Warren. But even if you say that Bobby Jr., there's a conflict of interest there, and I don't quite see the conflict of interest. But even say there's a conflict of interest that he might bring litigation, or the Department of Health and Human Services might bring lawsuits against Big Pharma, and he might benefit from that. And again, it all seems it's a stretch that he would benefit from this litigation. But in any case, he would only benefit from this litigation if the litigation was successful. If you're not successful, then you're not going to benefit from it. So one has to assume that this litigation would be successful to Big Pharma. Well, why would it be successful? Well, it would obviously be successful because Big Pharma was peddling a crap product, a product that it shouldn't have been peddling. I mean, that's how you would be successful with Big Pharma, like, Vioxx. And it turns out Vioxx was a lousy product, which was causing early death among the people to whom this was prescribed. So here she was saying, oh, yeah, there's a conflict of interest on your part. You would be making money on this. Wow, there's a real conflict of interest there. Well, what about the conflict of interest of a senator like Elizabeth Warren, who's getting money from Big Pharma? So if you're getting money from Big Pharma, and then when you come before the Senate confirmation hearing and you're just repeating Big Pharma talking points, then isn't that a conflict of interest? I mean, it's fairly obvious. So here is this left-wing populist advocating on behalf of Big Pharma and attacking as a conflict of interest somebody who's bringing suit against Big Pharma. So if you bring a suit against Big Pharma, that's a conflict of interest. But if you're getting money from Big Pharma, then that's okay. There's no conflict of interest. And again, we have liberals. Oh, Elizabeth Warren, fantastic job, fantastic. Wall Street Journal editorial page, was never seen a corporation making money that it didn't approve of. You never seen a greedy corporation that it didn't bask in its glory. He was supporting Warren against Kennedy. And so this was quite an amazing thing that she was, if you actually watch on YouTube some of the excerpts of her cross-examination of Bobby, she's getting all angry, the way you're supposed to get angry against some greedy fat cat who is rubbing the faces of the poor into the dirt. She is attacking somebody who apparently is going to make some money from litigation against Big Pharma. Now, the thing about the whole vaccine thing is it should be a fairly obvious one. There's been a proliferation of vaccines, far greater number than was the case just when I was a child. Then you got two inoculations, and that was it. I think it was, I can't remember what it was. I think measles. I don't think it was measles. I think it was just smallpox. I'm not even sure that I got anything else other than smallpox. Everything else, you did the tried and true method, which was through natural immunity. You got measles and you recovered from measles, and then you built up a lifelong immunity against measles. That's how the way it used to be. And even in the case of polio, I mean, I did get a polio vaccine, but only later on in life when I traveled somewhere where there was a danger of polio. But you didn't get it when you were born. They didn't just apply all these chemicals into a young child's body, which is what apparently these senators, all of whom were receiving dollops of money from big pharma, and say, yeah, we got to have all these vaccines. You got to, the moment you're born, you got to shovel these chemicals into the bodies of tiny vulnerable children. So I think it's reasonable to raise question: why are we getting so many of these vaccines? And therefore, maybe raise a question: well, maybe we have some issues, long-term health issues that are coming to the surface. I mean, there is a problem. Why is life expectancy in the United States going down? It's not supposed to be. Life expectancy is one of those things that's supposed to be rising. It's all part of science, control over nature, growing prosperity. Life expectancy is supposed to go up. If it's not going up, then something may be going wrong. Anyway, so I think in raising questions about vaccines, in particular the role of big pharma, who make huge contributions to politicians. They make huge contributions to the media. Look at all the advertising that they buy in the media, in particular television. That they're the ones who are putting forward all these ridiculous claims about the perfect health record of vaccines, and how dare anyone question their efficacy. Now, will Patel, Tulsi, Bobby succeed? I have my doubts. Every single Democrat will vote against them, and every single and then they would need Republicans more or less to hold the line in each case. That's going to be very difficult, given Collins, given Mitch McConnell, and of course Lisa Murkowski. And then if you lose three, then you don't have any margin. Then you basically got Vance will have to be the tiebreaker. And then if you lose anyone else, one other person, then I think it gets difficult. Now, in the case of Tulsi, they again brought up all this nonsense about her meetings with Bashar al-Assad, a totally phony issue. I mean, completely fraudulent. You meet people, particularly as a politician, because you want to know, what they think. Syria was under assault from Al-Qaeda, and I think it's very reasonable for any responsible politician to conclude that she went to see him in 2017 to conclude that Assad is better than the alternative. But of course, these fake, phony politicians, the Democrats, want to make this into a kind of good guys versus bad guys. You went there and you endorsed Assad, and you said, no, I don't endorse Assad. However, it's traditional in U.S. policy that it deals with people that it doesn't necessarily like, who have systems of government that the United States doesn't really approve of. But it deals with them. It aligns with them because they're better than the alternative. I mean, the United States has been doing this since time immemorial. So all this indignation, this fake, phony indignation about, Bashar al-Assad this or Bashar al-Assad that, and he tortured people, he killed people, whatever. Which even if it's true, even if every single allegation against him is true, he's still better than Al-Qaeda. I mean, so that's it. And again, this is something the United States has always done. Ever since FDR said about Somoza in Nicaragua, he said he may be a son of a bitch, but he is our son of a bitch. That's always been the United States policy. I mean, it's you always feel like, why are we even arguing about this? Because we've always known this. The United States does not just go around only having relations or talking to Democrats, Jeffersonian Democrats. Anyway, so it's fairly obvious. She didn't do a particularly effective job, which I think she should have done. She just said, apart from anything else, Nancy Pelosi did the same thing. She went to see Bashar al-Assad, and the pictures are there when she went to visit him. But so that was, I mean, it's again phony issues, and then the media are happy to go around pumping oxygen into these absurd stories. But will she make it? I doubt it. I think Republicans, there's enough in her views, whether it's on Assad, and whether in suggesting that NATO had provoked Russia in Ukraine. There's enough there to persuade, one or two Republicans to say we're not going to support her. So I think she probably isn't going to make it. With Bobby Jr. as well. Again, difficulties. I think there'll be some Republicans. The big pharma. You've got the big pharma lobby who are going to put pressure against the Republicans to vote against him. So we'll see. And the same with Kash Patel. So anyway. Now, the one other thing is, to follow up on what we were talking about. We spent a lot of time on Tuesday talking about Alexander Vucic, the president of Serbia, and it does seem that the United States is, and the West in general, has given up on Vucic. As I say, I don't think there's a color revolution taking place. There may be. There may well be that there's some Western money, Western support being funneled to the student protesters in Serbia against Vucic. But Vucic has kind of done pretty much what the West had wanted from him, which was what was feasible for him to deliver, and so therefore he, the West doesn't have any particularly hostile feelings towards him. On the other hand, it does seem like the people of Serbia are sick to death of Vucic. And therefore, it's hard to see how he can survive for much longer. In other words, I think he'll probably hold early elections, and I think he'll probably lose the elections. And I think the West will just say, we can't go on, we can't do anything to save him. I think the West response, I think, would be they would like to save Vucic. But I think they probably have now decided that they can't do it. He's beyond salvation. And S.A. Delendam says this: I don't get the Vucic thing. Is it just that the awning collapsed, or is there more to it? Well, I mean, first of all, it was a brand new concrete canopy that was built. I mean, you build this thing, it costs a lot of money to build, and then it collapses within hours of opening the canopy, and then kills 15 people. So that's quite a serious issue. But it somehow highlights the corruption of the Vucic era. If Vucic had been a better leader, if he had been a more successful leader, if he had achieved other things, he had been a more popular leader. If he had pursued some Serbian national popular goals, then I think he could have, he might have been able to bring out, the masses on his behalf. Yeah, okay, the liberals are out to get me. They've always hated me, but I've got some Serbian people behind me, the people who say, yeah, but at least he's delivered on Kosovo, or at least he's delivered on our nationalist agenda. He doesn't. He doesn't. He has never delivered on anything. It's one fiasco after another, and I think once that happens, there's just no one who's going to come out and defend you. So my bet would be that Vucic will not survive, and therefore he'll be replaced with someone who probably will be a kind of a more of a, going back a generation, to some of the people who came to power in the aftermath of the overthrow of Milosevic. But I doubt whether they will enjoy any real popularity either. I mean, these are all puppets. None of them are in any way representative of the Serbian people. They're all there in order to serve their foreign masters, their Western masters. So it's just, you go to Djindjic and Koštunica and Jeremic and Tadic and Nikolic and Vucic. I mean, they're all much of a muchness, and they're all there essentially to fulfill somebody else's agenda. The problem which does arise here is Russia. Now, Russia has invested a great deal in Vucic, and it has supported Vucic, supported him diplomatically, supported him in all sorts of ways. But it's all been one-way traffic. Vucic has never reciprocated in any way. He has gone along with most of the West agenda on Russia and Ukraine, hasn't imposed sanctions as yet, though he has said, maybe I'm going to have to do it. We're so weak and so vulnerable. Maybe we're going to have to do it. He's made every indication that he said, I can't resist the West much longer. They're going to force me into adopting sanctions against Russia. But he has not really done anything for Russia. As I say, he hasn't met with Putin in a long time. He's met with Zelensky. There've been a number of meetings. He's visited Ukraine. He's been friendly with Zelensky. He doesn't go and meet Putin. And yet the Russians continue to support him. They still come out with all these statements. Color revolution. The West is out to get him. They're trying to overthrow him. And when I think he will be gone, as I say, I think he'll be gone quite soon. They'll have somebody who will be explicitly hostile to Russia, and that will be another failure of Russian foreign policy. In other words, Russia will have lost its last, quote, ally, unquote, in Europe, much as Russia has now lost Armenia, and it's well on the way to losing Azerbaijan, probably soon on the road to losing Kazakhstan as well. Now, Serbia is a particular case, and why, you can say, okay, well, there's nothing much they could have done about Armenia, maybe, we can talk about that. Serbia was something that they could and should have done a lot more with, because Serbia is the one country in the world that actually has very fond feelings towards Russia. That's not really true in many other places, the Russians have been losing influence in places like Kazakhstan. The Kazakhs are kind of, gradually they've been displacing the Russians, and gradually Kazakhstan has been turning against Russia. But Serbia, there's still been a lot of warm feelings towards Russia, going back. Obviously goes back to a long time. Back before World War I, and then back during the post-Cold War era, when the Russians did support the Serbs in the sort of, Yeltsin didn't do much, but they sort of supported them in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then supported them with Kosovo, and particularly. The Serbs remember what happened in 1999, in June 1999, when the Russian troops entered Kosovo and made their famous charge to Pristina. Why did they do that? Why did the Russians make their charge to Pristina? And remember, that was Yeltsin. That wasn't Putin. That was Yeltsin. Yeltsin, or whoever made those decisions in those days, probably Yeltsin wasn't there, but they were still Yeltsin was president. They made their charge into Pristina in order to save the Serbs. Remember, NATO, they made an agreement. NATO was going to enter, but it was supposed to be an international force, KFOR. But Russia was part of the international force. But the expectation was that the NATO part of the KFOR would enter first, and then Russia would just dawdle and so on. Instead, the Russians seized their opportunity. They rushed ahead of NATO, and this caused absolute pandemonium among NATO. They weren't expecting this dash into the Pristina airport. Now, why did the Russians do that? They did it in order to save the Serbs, because they knew exactly what the plan was. Wesley Clark, the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, Wesley Clark, we knew exactly. He hated the Serbs. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He wanted to see. Remember, the KLA came in. The Kosovo Liberation Army came in on the back of NATO. So they'd taken over. They were basically taking over in Kosovo, and the idea was they were going to drive all the Serbs out. Every single Serb was going to be driven out of Kosovo. That was the plan. And Wesley Clark knew that this was the plan. So when the Russians made their charge to the Pristina airport, it was with a view to saving the Serbs from an ethnic cleansing of Kosovo. And the Serbs never forgot that. And of course, then NATO rushed in, and particularly they rushed the Pristina airport, and Wesley Clark was about to give the order to start shooting at the Russian forces. But he was dissuaded from doing so by this General Michael Jackson, who said, well, I'm not going to start World War III for you. That was the Wesley Clark. The same Wesley Clark, and I know I say this, and I'm not going to go on about this because I'm always saying this, the same Wesley Clark that the alt media is constantly harping on about, because he said we're going to overthrow 7 regimes. Seven regimes. General Wesley Clark said, we were going to overthrow 7 regimes in the Middle East. Wesley Clark said, and then even Zaharova quote, puts this out there on her Twitter feed. Oh, Wesley Clark saying this. Wesley Clark never came up with any of. He never presented any evidence. Anyway, but the point is, this was the Wesley Clark, that same Wesley Clark who was started ready to shoot at Russian soldiers. The same Wesley Clark who basically had signaled to the KLA, "Hey, drive out the Serbs. There aren't that many of them, and the hell with them. There's only about 200,000 of them. Just kick them out." That was Wesley Clark, and the Russians came in. They went to Pristina Airport, and that did the job. That ensured that the Serbs would survive in Kosovo, and that was the moment when you got the kind of the contemporary bond between the Russians and the Serbs was forged. That basically the Russians saved the lives of the Serbs in Kosovo. And why I bring that up is that Russia could always have exploited this very good feeling, this goodwill that had existed in Serbia towards them. They could always have fueled some kind of a popular grassroots movement in Serbia, a pro-Russian popular grassroots movement in Serbia. Instead, they hitched their wagon to Vucic's star, or the other way around. You hitch your star to the Vucic's wagon, and decided they just were wholeheartedly to support Vucic, who couldn't give a damn about them. So now, having essentially completely aligned themselves with a very unpopular leader, once he goes, the Russian influence in Serbia is going to go, because that's it. Vucic is gone. It'll be seen to be a massive failure of Russian foreign policy, just as the loss of Syria was a massive failure of Russian foreign policy. Vucic will be gone, and he'll be replaced by somebody who will be, at the very least, hostile towards Russia. So, that's it. I think that was an opportunity that's gone. Peter S. says, Emir Kusturica for Serbian president, somebody with guts. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I like Kusturica. That's right. Somebody like that. Definitely not Vucic. All right, let's before I go on to the next subject, I have before talking about that, let me just look at some of the no, that's not it. The right one. Let me go to the locals page. See, the people who provide the sustenance to Buddy and the rest of that, the savage hounds. And let me go. Where are we? Let me just. This is the locals page. That. All right. So anyway, Danaki, who says, Kedves George, dear George, in yet another stunning victory. It's always these are always Danaki's comments. It's always in yet another stunning victory. A sarcastic comment coming up, with which I will wholeheartedly agree. In yet another stunning victory, Gazprom is raising prices for domestic consumption because, surprise, surprise, supplies to Turkey and China are not so profitable. According to independent estimates, they are 2 or more times cheaper than pumping gas to the EU. Supplies to the CIS countries are even less profitable, and China, as a good unlimited partner, keeps squeezing them for further discounts. Yeah, China. The same with yes, China. This the great Russian friend and ally is keeps demanding ever lower prices. We don't need no stinking Europe. We can supply our gas to China, but the Chinese, the one thing we've always known about them is they drive a hard bargain. They will drive. If they can get a better price, they're going to get a better price, and so they have indeed been absolutely ruthlessly negotiating as low a price as possible for their gas imports from Russia. But of course, what has happened is that essentially because of the low prices that Russia is being forced to accept, where it's in China, and the low prices to Turkey, Erdogan is also says, "Hey, I want to, I want to pay these very low prices." Because Russia is forced to negotiate these very low prices, Gazprom is not making any money. And of course, in this business, if you don't make any money, then you don't have any money to invest in maintenance and all the improvements necessary to keep the industry going. So the only way Gazprom can continue to do its work is to raise prices, but they can't raise the prices on the Chinese. They can't raise the prices on the Turks. So they're going to raise the prices on Russian domestic consumers, and that's in fact what they've done. And so naturally, this is a real problem. Again, with all the issues, we already have a very high inflation rate in Russia. We have this high interest rates. So on top of the inflation that's hitting Russians, now they're going to have to pay much more for their gas consumption at home, which is particularly egregious given that Russia is such a huge gas producer. So, but how else is Gazprom going to make money other than hitting Russian consumers? So so there's that. But of course, the Chinese, they could become even more difficult. I think they could easily continue to drive down prices even more, and they're going to fall in with sanctions. They're already falling in with a number of sanctions, but they're going to fall in with sanctions even more, particularly once Trump starts applying pressure to them. The Chinese are going to start figuring out where do our interests lie, and they may well decide, that hey, if the Americans will start pressing us, particularly with sanctions, when they're sanctioning our banks, and sanctioning our insurance companies, sanctioning our ports and so on, we got to keep in with our the Americans. So that I think that could well be another painful issue down the road. Anyway, Tanaki then says, "So can we please once and for all cut it out already with this yet another delusional hopium psyop of Russia winning this marvelous economic war and totally destroying, demilitarizing, deindustrializing NATO at all? I know on paper Russia could make it an autarky, but woulda, coulda, shoulda, the hard reality that it is not, and doesn't look like the oligarchs are going to accept that." No, I think that's absolutely right, because first of all, to go back to do autarky means Russia goes back to the Soviet era. Russia returns to the Soviet Union, which is what it did during that era. Russia was cut off from the world economy, but could nonetheless provide for itself because it produced so many of the key ingredients for an economy to function. But there's a number of problems with it. I mean, one of which, as you said, the oligarchs absolutely want to continue to do business with the West, and so they're not going to be happy with any kind of autarkic system. The other thing is, of course, that the Russian people themselves don't want to be cut off from the world economy. They kind of like traveling around the world. They like to buy things on the world markets. They like get access to Paris and London and Milan and so on. They don't want to go back to the Soviet era. That's the thing. I mean, that basically that there's no desire to go back to essentially what a pre-1982 era, the pre-Brezhnev era of autarky. So it's just not going to happen. And above all, I don't think you can do it now, because remember that era, the Soviet era, was one in which that was still a kind of in terms of the Industrial Revolution, was a very much a kind of the basic stuff. What was it the Soviet Union used to produce? Coal, iron, crude oil, steel, machine tools, and at that time you could do it. You didn't need particularly sophisticated technology. It's very hard to be autarkic if you're cut off from the key ingredients of the modern economy. And so that's why I think it's going to be difficult. When you have the ingredients, computers, AI, software, internet. It's just going to be difficult, if you're doing autarky, to keep up with that. So I have my doubts about that. The other thing is that this winning the economic war. It's hard to see how this war has been won, because it's Russia at the moment that's having to spend. We don't know what percentage of its economy to maintain this war against Ukraine. Again, could well be on the way to victory, but it's a huge investment, and it obviously is having an impact on the rest of the economy, through inflation. But whatever, if it's say 6.5% of GDP, that's a huge amount. NATO's not spending that kind of money, so it's hard to see how this economic war is being waged, or economic war is being won. And then you've got the Trump problem. What is Trump going to do? Because I think Trump will try to escalate this, because he thinks that he can win this economic war by basically turbocharging the American economy, and particularly on the issues of armaments and so on. So I don't know. It's I'm always puzzled, when I'm looking at the alt media, which is telling me how Russia's on the brink of victory. Russia has all the cards. Russia's winning. In fact, it's over. Basically just saying, hey, it's over. It's over. Russia has won. And you always feel like, well, the thing is that you actually want to win. Don't just keep saying you're winning. You need to win. If it's over, then it's over. Then people sit around the table and sign an agreement, and then they say, yeah, you've won. But it's the strange phenomenon in the alt media of just having a podcast, and the theme of the podcast is, well, Russia has won. and say, well, that's odd, that's that's the sum and substance of your podcast. Well, Russia has won. Well, where's the victory party? I want to take part in it. Anyway, so thank you, Danaki. And Robert says, well, thank you for yesterday's illuminating ICC and justice post. Thank you so much, Robert. And for Foucault, the origins of the Western judiciary are found in the battles waged by medieval warlords. Conquering warlords would leave behind a remnant of their army to organize and enforce the collection of taxes. In time, this remnant evolved into the judiciary, the complex of courts, their administrative bodies, and their separate armed enforcement agencies. In the U.S., the sheriff and his deputies. I think that's right. I mean, as you said, the battles waged by medieval lords, and that's how you do justice. Conquering warlords would leave behind a remnant of their army to organize and enforce the collection of taxes. And yeah, that was the origin of the justice system. And you basically had to ensure that the people had to pay their tithes, and that they would do so. And so that there was never any issue that justice would be impartially administered. It says, well, it's whoever is powerful. The powerful impose their rule, and then they call it justice. The powerful people, the justice does not apply to them. It's only, those who are weak, who can't defend themselves, they are the ones who are subject to the rules of the courts. And that's what's happened here. So, but what's happened with the international ad hoc tribunals, which is what the ICC is, even though it's permanently in session, is that it has no legal basis, but it's there to make the Western powers feel good about themselves. It issues its solemn rulings. It has its judges wearing fancy robes, and it ensures that the weak are punished, was the powerful, go free. But they call it, well, we're bringing accountability, we're bringing impunity, we're ending impunity. So you're absolutely right, Robert. Thank you so much. And then Mark says, George, a wave of auto suppliers in Germany have filed back for bankruptcy, and thousands of jobs are lost. Volkswagen debt $200 billion, I guess, dollars. Their only none is Chinese are taking a factory to save jobs. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I mean, there's no question. This is part of a great decline in Germany, and this is why and we've talked a lot about this. This is why the German economy is so fragile, and it can't go on, just simply taking this kind of a pounding, and self-inflicted. It could easily have maintained its relations with Russia. It could go on enjoying cheap energy. It would have gone on, essentially as a productive, advanced economy. Now it's in this horrific position. I mean, obviously, part of it is this the loss of cheap energy from Russia, but another part is of this ridiculous green agenda. You've put all these burdens on German industry, and it's hard to see how Germany can go on being competitive. And so this is something that could, within the next, within the next decade, Germany just ceases to have any real power in the world. It just ceases to be any kind of a major economy. And so, yeah, I mean, these key industries are just fleeing from Germany. Lynn says, I heard the sun strike was the possible cause, but I'm sure it was Putin. Yes, that's exactly right. George, a good program on the this is Mark says, George, a good program on the BBC done good documentaries on the space race, charting the Soviet American race. The program concludes that Russia did win. Well worth watching. Okay, well, if you could provide a link to that, I think it'd be worth watching. Maybe we could even screen it here at on the Gaggle. And I mean, look, I mean, when you say the won the space race, you would say, well, what is it that that aspect, what aspect of the space race will have been won? The putting a man on the moon, you can say that didn't mean very much or whatever, but nonetheless, the Americans did put a man on the moon. It captured the world's imagination, and it got everybody very excited. It's something that everybody understood, and it was a key part of the Cold War. I mean, this is a huge victory for the United States in the Cold War because it put a man on the moon. If you had a space race, and while it's true that the Russians were the first to launch a satellite into space, the Russians were the first to launch to send a rocket into orbit, and the Russians were the first to put a man into space. Nonetheless, when it came to the trip to the moon, then the Americans did that, and that's something that enormously impressed the world. And then again, with sending the telescopes, exploring the planets and everything, which is quite exciting. People see, hey, look, we send these telescopes on the various planets, provided footage from the planets and so on. So it's quite exciting. The Russians have also done their thing. They created the space stations, which are also very important. So it's a question of, when you say somebody has won the space race, how do you count a victory? I mean, both the Russians and the Americans have accomplished something in the space race, but I don't know, just declaring the Russians won the space race, you'd have to explain to me what it is, how you're going to count it that the Russians had won this. So anyway, Roberts, thank you so much, Robert, for your generosity. Says Robert says the latest from the Garden State, from gold bars to iron bars. Menendez, gets an 11-year sentence. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, 11-year sentence. That's quite something. Yeah, there's that's. But I don't know. Does he? I didn't see that. Does he begin the sentence now, or is this pending an appeal? I don't see any basis for an appeal, to be honest. But yeah. It finally caught up with Menendez. And then Mark says the Soviet Union was the first unmanned mission to the moon. Yeah, the first living creature to space, the first satellite, first man in the first spacewalk, the first woman in space. So yeah, okay, but they did all that. But nonetheless, it was the Americans who put a man on the moon. Yeah, that's true. They put the first spacecraft into space. The first to break the Earth's orbit, and so on. They did that, but eventually the Americans did put a man on the moon, and that's in the end what people remember. They do remember the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. They do remember the first woman in space, and so on. Nonetheless, I mean, it's not a question of who was the first. It's a question of what came subsequently. I mean, the Americans caught up, and then the Americans put a man on the moon. So, I mean, if you're going to start talking in terms of, who won the space race, as I said, the Americans did that, and the Americans then, had this with the space, the telescopes, traveled around the planets and so on, which is, quite impressive. We've seen, footage from Mars, we've seen footage from Venus, Jupiter, and so on. And it says that Russians, built a space station. So, again, you'd have to tell me what the criterion is as to having won the space race. I mean, Russians started off strong, but then, the Americans caught up. Anyway, Robert says, it is fair to say that the Havara Agreement, the policy by which the Jews in Germany got passage to Palestine from 1933 to 1939, serves as the basis of the argument that the Zionists and the Nazis collaborated, even though the agreement seems to have been much more of a business deal. German Jews paid for the goods produced by the German companies to be shipped to mandatory Palestine, which they would then, once they had emigrated. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Havara Agreement was a way to get the German Jews to leave Germany and go to Palestine, and their money. This is how they were able to transfer their money. They were able to transfer their money to Palestine on condition that this money was used to purchase goods from Germany, and so that was the part of the deal. So that went on for some years. So the Nazis encouraged Jews to leave Germany and go to Palestine, and they encouraged. Obviously, there was a financial interest there, because this was essentially German goods were then exported to Palestine. So in other words, this money was being used to export German exports to Palestine. So it was interesting. But this came to an end, I think, in 1939. 1939, essentially, Jews had ceased to be able to leave Germany. So yeah, that is the origin of the story of the collaboration between the Nazis and the Zionists, in the sense that they both had an interest in getting Jews from Germany into Palestine, and that was really pretty much the last of any big emigration from Europe into Palestine until well, there was some obviously after the war, but it wasn't such a big move. But until the 1970s, and there was the big Jewish emigration from the Soviet Union into Israel. And then Anne-Marie, always very good to see you. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for your generosity. Thank you so much. It says, Switzerland, Anne-Marie says, is showing her ugly face, arresting, interrogating, and deporting an American Palestinian journalist. Yeah, that's right. This is the person who runs the website, the Electronic Intifada. Worth reading the article by Kevin Costola on what exactly happened. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you, Anne Marie, for that. For the link. Yeah, this is the head of the Ali. I can't pronounce his surname. Who runs this very good website, the Electronic Intifada, who went to Switzerland to speak at a conference, and then he was arrested, held. He was in prison for some time, and then expelled from the country. He had committed no crime. His only crime was he was going to speak at the at a Palestinian conference. So that's a thank you for that, Anne Marie, for that link. I think it's very interesting. Marty, thank you. Merry Thursday, George and Gagglers. Thank you so much, Marty. And let's see. Yeah, and then Mark says, George, this is not 1945, the race to Berlin. Russia has depleted NATO of weapons and Ukraine manpower. The Ukrainian replacement rate has dropped from 60,000 to around 340,000 men per month. Well, what I would say about that is that ultimately, the proof of the pudding. Russia is 5 times the size of Ukraine. Russia is basically making, snail's progress in Donetsk. These numbers that are being thrown around, we don't know. I don't believe the Russian numbers. I don't believe the Ukrainian numbers. We simply don't know how many casualties are really being suffered. I mean, everyone's throwing around these numbers. I think they're wildly exaggerated. But ultimately, you'd have to say the same thing, which is, don't count on the fact that you're going to win a war of attrition. Don't count on that, because no one knows the scale of the casualties that you suffer and the effect that this goes. What is it? George saying, 34,000. Well, Russia has lost a lot more than 34,000. I don't know. This is where. Let me just. I don't know. Let me just click on this link. Yeah, I mean, it's just basically, if it would be very, this is the space race. Okay, thank you for that. Anyway, as I say, both sides have lost staggering number of men. You win the war when you win the war. Russia is making a very snail's progress in Donetsk. Russia still has not captured the key strategic locations in Donetsk. You can't win Donetsk until you've taken Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. That's the key. They haven't taken that. You've misread. I can't follow what you've said. Sorry, Marx. You haven't presented your what you said clearly. I'm going by what the casualty numbers. The casualty numbers on both sides, and then I'm going by how much progress is Russia making. Russia is making snail's progress. That's all it is. It's making a very snail's progress. They might be able to win on that basis, but at an extraordinary expense, enormous loss of life, and that's the only way that you could say, well, you have won. All this kind of stuff, that replacement rate. Russia has not taken the key strategic locations in Donetsk. When he does, well, then we can talk. But throwing around these numbers is just meaningless. And Perus says, George, a movie question. What's your opinion of the Day of the Jackal? The Day of the Jackal. Vanguard says the expense is higher if they go faster. Well, it may or may not be. I mean, ultimately, then you win. The longer anything goes on, the more dangerous it is, because we just simply, there are all sorts of unknowns that can happen in a war. One of which is that it could, which side is the morale going to collapse? The assumption, our assumption is the morale will collapse first in Ukraine. Hasn't happened yet. It's been we've heard about this, 3 years that this morale is going to collapse. It hasn't done so. It may. I'm not saying it's not going to collapse, but it hasn't collapsed. It may collapse in Russia. May not. Probably won't, but it's possible. Anytime this war goes on, you have no idea who's going to collapse first. Like as I said about the World War I. World War I, France was on the brink of collapse in 1917, but in the end, it was Germany that collapsed in 1918. Germany that had prevailed on the Russian front collapsed on the Western front. It's very unpredictable. That's why in any war, you need to win as quickly as possible, because a war is just full of unknowns. And the idea that you can just simply make this kind of linear plot and say like that, well, therefore we're going to win this war, because you draw it out on a straight line. Well, that always goes wrong. And as I said, that's exactly what the Americans did in Vietnam. They said, we're going to win this because through attrition, we can go on fighting, minimal casualties on our side, on the American side, minimal casualties, whereas the Viet Cong are taking horrific casualties. And indeed, there's no question, the Viet Cong were taking, at the very least, 10-1, if not more, casualties as the Americans were. And the Americans said, well, if we just plot a straight line and say who's going to collapse first, well, they're going to collapse. They're not going to be able to sustain this war. We can hit, because we have the technological advance, we're going to keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them, and we're just going to wipe them out, whereas we're suffering minimal casualties. Well, it didn't work out that way. Anyway, I want to just finally say something about Trump. Can I bring this up? Yes, let me see. Trump having advanced the cause of free speech during his first few days in office, has decided to go down the path of canceling free speech by embracing the whole issue of of anti-Semitism, embracing the issue of we have to fight against anti-Semitism. So if you recall, back in 2019, Trump had, where are we? Can I do this? Screen share, yeah, let me see this. All right. He had presented an executive order, December 2019. He presented this executive order on combating anti-Semitism. And it said, blah, blah, claimed again, this is 2019, anti-Semitic incidents have increased since 2013, and students in particular have continued to face anti-Semitic harassment in schools and on university and other college campuses. That's 2019. So, this is long before October the 7th and Hamas and so on. And then he goes on It shall be the policy of the executive branch to enforce Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 against discrimination. And then he said, ensuring the robust enforcement of Title VI, in enforcing Title VI and identifying the evidence of discrimination based on the race and color or national origin. It says the non-legally binding, and we're going to use the non-legally binding working definition of anti-Semitism adopted on May the 26th, 2016 by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. That's their definition. And then it says anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews, or rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish and non-Jewish, and so on. So what was this definition? This is the one that the United States government has embraced, this definition of anti-Semitism from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And then it says here, this is the State Department. This is from the State Department's website. And it says here that there's the examples, contemporary examples of anti-Semitism, calling for aiding and justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology. And then anti-Semitism is also making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, and then accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group. But that's interesting. Well, this happens all the time. Somebody commits a crime, and then people use that to generalize about anybody else. Obviously, it's said about Muslims, but it's also said about white people. So when you have somebody like Dylan Roof in the United States, who committed this horrific murder in a black church in 2015, everyone jumped on that and said, well, this is a crime committed by all white Americans. All white Americans are equally guilty for Dylan Roof's killing of 7 people in the black church. Similarly, with the death of George Floyd, even though he actually died of natural causes, but it was taken that he was killed by a white policeman, and all of white America was responsible for that death. Anyway, apparently another anti-Semitism is act of anti-Semitism is denying the fact, scope, mechanism, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of Nazi Germany, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. So in other words, again, never call any aspect of that into question. And then accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nation, even though that's obviously correct, because there are many publicists and internet influencers who are clearly a lot more loyal to Israel and care much more about Israel than they do about the United States. And then it says, applying double standards, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination. For example, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. Again, this is obviously an intellectual argument. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but nonetheless, it's obviously an intellectual argument. But that apparently is also evidence of anti-Semitism. And then applying double standards by requiring of it as a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. Again, in other words, don't criticize Israel, because if you criticize Israel, then you have to immediately declare that, I'm saying this about Israel, but I want to say this about Russia as well, and I'm going to say this about the United States, and I'm going to say this about France and everything. So never single out Israel for any criticism, because you have to immediately qualify that by using that same criticism against some other country. And then, of course, holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel. Well, yeah, but this kind of is a circular argument, because if you declare that any criticism of the state of Israel is anti-Semitic, then it's just the other side of the coin of saying we're holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel. So if you say any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, then by definition, all Jews are responsible for Israel, and that any criticism of Israel is a criticism of the Jews. And then here is this this new this is the new decision by Trump. This where he says about the Executive Order 1389, which was the one with the red first, and he makes this declaration. Go back. That Executive Order 13899 provided interpretation assistance on the enforcement of the nation's civil rights laws to ensure that they would protect American Jews to the same extent to which all other American citizens are protected, and said that blah blah. He said they talked about the terrorist attack, Hamas terrorist attacks. These attacks unleashed an unprecedented wave of vile anti-Semitic discrimination, vandalism, and violence against our citizens, especially in our schools and our campuses. Again, untrue. And then Jewish students have faced an unrelenting barrage of discrimination, denial of access to campus common areas and facilities, not true, including libraries and classrooms, and intimidation, harassment, and physical threats and assault. Again, no, there's never been any evidence of that. And then he goes on, within 60 days of the date of this order, the head of each executive department or agency shall submit a report to the president, blah, blah, to identifying all civil and criminal authorities, civil and criminal authorities or actions within the jurisdiction of that agency that might be used to curb or combat anti-Semitism, and containing an inventory and analysis of all pending administrative complaints against or involving institutions, and then goes on. The report submitted by the Attorney General under this section shall additionally include an inventory and an analysis of all court cases as of this date of this report against or involving institutions of higher learning alleging civil rights violations related to or arising from October the 7th and campus anti-Semitism. And again, you see here, the report submitted by the Secretary of Education under this section shall additionally include an inventory and analysis of Title VI and so on. So here you can see that what the Trump administration is doing is threatening criminal actions, on something that has been completely made up about, anti-Semitic discrimination, anti-Semitic actions. All of this is simply to ensure that the university campuses are not the scenes of any Palestinian manifestations, any support for Palestinians, and thereby any criticisms of the state of Israel. So, as I say, Trump starts off as he's going to champion free speech. We're going to, we're not going to censor speech anymore. And then here he is bringing this executive order with this extremely nebulous definition of anti-Semitism that is now going to be applied not just to universities and but to high schools and even K 6 to 12, and so any teachers or anyone expressing criticisms of Israel could find himself facing essentially criminal prosecution. I mean, if you're going to use that definition of anti-Semitism used by that International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, could mean almost anything. Anyway, thank you very much. My time is up. Thank you so much, everybody who has joined me. Thank you, everyone who has contributed and with all sorts of questions and comments. Really appreciate that. And the dogs, well, they're not happy, but that's my problem. We're going to do some more podcasts over the weekend, and then next Monday, Peter and I will do our live stream. Please join us then. And then next Tuesday, I'm going to do my solo. So, I hope to see you then. In the meantime, thank you. Let's hope there'll be some better news over the weekend. So thank you for today. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.